built a few Gauge 1 live steam locomotives so far. This is the next one I'm going to build, and it's going to be scratch built and it's going to be live steam, and I hope you find the series of following videos interesting to watch.
Hello and welcome to part 17 of the Gauge 1 Great Western Railway Prairie tank scratch build. What we're going to do in this episode is going to add an axle pump in the chassis. It'll have to sit in the chassis, and the axle pump, as name implies, will be driven off the axle to supply water to the boiler as the locomotive is running. Just showing a little bit more detail for those of you who aren't familiar what this axle pump looks like. I'm using as an example the locomotive. You probably don't recognize it upside down, but this is the locomotive that you see on the opening sequence as it goes past the station pulling the 3 coaches, and you can see we've got it turned upside down. But this is where the axle pump is sitting on this particular model, and you can see it's driven off again another eccentric here, and there's a little piston that just goes backwards and forwards, and there's water comes from the tender into here, and as the engine's running, this pump runs all the time and it just squirts a little bit of water, keeps the boiler topped up. Okay, just looking now a little bit closer at detail, this is where the upright part of the axle pump is going to sit on our chassis, and looking at it, there's enough room to squeeze it in there. First part of the operation, as you've probably seen a couple of times on these videos by now, is just to start by facing off the end of our brass bar. Next thing we need to do is we've got to drill a hole in here, a bore in here. This is tapped with an ME thread. But the other thing, important thing about this is it has to have a flat bottom. So once I've drilled it out, I'll be using a flat bottom or a D-bit type of arrangement to get this flat. Is just as a rough guide now, I've marked the total length of what this main body has to be. It's got to be drilled at least 13/16, over 13/16 in length. Okay, that's certainly deep enough there. If I just measure that drill, yeah, that's plenty deep enough now. So that's the small hole through the length of the body. Need to now put this other 3/16 by 40 hole in there that has to have a flat bottom. So I will sort out my tapping size for a 3/16 by 40 thread. Right, I've found the correct tapping size drill to go down here for 3/16 by 1/4 thread, and it has to go down 1/4 inch, which is going to be 250 thou. So what I've done this time, I've calibrated this on the tailstock so I know exactly how far to turn it. Right, that's the drill hole gone down 250 thou. Let's put our D-bit size drill in, and it's only got to go down, if you think this pointed bit here, it's really only got to go down the depth of that pointed bit to remove that shape from the bottom of the hole. So it needs to go down 0, Probably needs to go down no more than about a 1/16 of an inch. So we'll feed our drill in. There's the end. That's 250 thou. One, two. There's 50. So it just needs another 20-30 thou or so. Because what that's given us is essentially a hole that shape. And the idea why we're going to the trouble to make this flat, what's going to sit on here is a ball bearing. So that has to be flat. And that creates a seal as it makes a one-way valve. Have our tapping drill now. This is the taper tap set up, ready to start to cut the thread. I've set the graduations on the tailstock, giving you a rough idea how deep I'm going to be going. So we can start to cut this thread. Just gentle turns. That's 100 thou. 130 coming up. 150. Doesn't need to go all the way to the bottom. That's 200 just coming up. And that's probably deep enough. And we can take this out and then use my plug tap. Again, I'll calibrate the tailstock, make a setting of how deep we want to go. So again, ready to start at 0 and start to cut the final thread. This is coming up to 170. I can feel it now cutting the final part. 170, 190, and that's 200. And that's probably deep enough how far we want to go. And let's take that out, and what we shall do is just lop off the end of this and get this down to this proper length. Here's our mini cylinder in the chuck, ready to have the hole drilled through for the piston. And we're going to drill this short, undersized, because ultimately this has got to be reamed, so we need a nice reamed fit through here. But we can start off by centre drilling, like so. And our drawings says that's going to be 532 reamed hole. 156. That's standard diameter to take a piece of standard size stainless steel to make the piston itself. So I'm going to drill the hole at 140, which is about 16 thou under. So that gives enough meat for the reamer to take the rest of the material off to give us a nice finish. And we've broken through. So that's good. So while we're in position, I can now go through with my 532 reamer, which is 156. This is the main part of the pump body. Remember there's the tapped holes each end. And also what I've done now is I've started with a centre drill, a little hole in the centre that's going to be opened out wide enough. So there's this little stub So it's just going to fit in there, going to be held tight in there while I silver solder that up. So they're just starting to melt. Right, we've got the main body of the pump soldered up now. What you see me doing now is adding a 40 an ME thread. It's a 40 TPI thread, 1/4 inch, and I'm adding this to the main part of the body. The reason I'm putting this thread on is this will screw into a holder, a bracket that mounts onto the mounting side of the frame. So we just got to put this 40 thou thread just down the body of the pump. Also, what I'm doing is just taking the opportunity to run a reamer down here just to get this bore ready. That's a taper reamer there. Just put down, need to put a full parallel reamer down in a moment. Okay, here's the pump so far. This is the main cylinder, and you can see there I've put the 40 thou thread on, and as you saw before, I've just run down that with a reamer as well. So that's essentially the main pump body. Ready to start making the banjo now. What I've just put in the chuck is a 3/16 diameter piece of brass bar, and we're just going to start off as per usual. Just put a center hole in it, ready for the drill. I'm going to make the two banjos together. I'm going to make one, cut it off, and then cut the next one off. So we can sort of drill the two holes in one fell swoop. This is a clearance drill going through here, just going to clear for the little piece that goes through. You'll see what I mean as we progress, but we'll just put a drill hole through here. That's all we need to do. Take this out the chuck, and a little hole 1/8 diameter through, just through here. I'll drill two because I'm going to make two banjos. Going to get two banjos out of this. Set up in our drill vise now. Ready to drill these 1/8 holes. And this is always a little bit of a fiddle, trying to start a hole in the bar. I've centre popped the drilling points for it, so I'll just carefully get the drill started. Might have to twiddle this a little bit. But it's nothing fancy, it's just a hole that goes into the side of this banjo. So let's do it. That's the first one done. Second one. Okay, we can just pop this back in the lathe and just part these off for the pieces that we want. And all I have to do now, just part these off. So we want to leave about a 1/16 of meat on either side of these holes. So set that there. Let's do the first one to get it the right length. And grab our parting tool. that's not bad. Now I've just realised that this parting off tool is probably a bit too, no, it'll work. It's probably a bit, I was going to say it was a little bit too generous. It's going to take too much material off, but it looks okay. Just take a quick measurement of that. Oh, that's spot on. Spot on. Perfect. Right, started making the top bolt, and I've got my piece of hexagon bar, and I've turned that down ready to put the 3/16 by 40 thread on here. So I've got my die in the die holder, and we can start to cut this thread. Gently turn it. In this die holder, these are really good because it ensures that you get a nice square thread, that it's actually cut parallel on the surfaces. It's not, doesn't wander off. It's a nice true thread that gets cut using these die holders. They're really worth the investment. So how it works, banjo goes over there, and this screws onto the end like that. So what I have to do now, this is a good example actually, is where that hole is, there's like a clearance around there, so I need to put, just to make doubly sure, I'll put a bit more of a recess in there, and that's where my other hole is going to break through when I drill the end of this bolt. Before we pop it back in the lathe to cut that little recess and part it off to length, there's a little operation I can do here while it's easier to do and it's all in one piece. And what we've got to do is just cut a little cross through here. Not too deep, and just a little cross piece here. So here's our first bolt completed now, with the thread, the hole drilled up through there. Now these little cross pieces in there, they're drilled just to stop the little ball bearing that's going to float up and down in here as the water flows either way. And obviously, as I pump and the ball bearing goes that way, this is a one-way valve, so I want the water to go past the ball bearing. I don't want the ball bearing to block this little hole, so this is what the little cutouts are for. So if it does go hard up against that hole, there's still gaps with these little saw cuts here, with this cutout, with these crosses, for water still to go up the centre of this bolt and come out at the little hole here. Well, here's the other bolt, feed, whatever you want to call it. I don't know the proper name for it, but this is the other one made. Same way as this one, except the only difference between this one is it doesn't have these cross flutes cut in, because what will happen on this one, as the ball bearing moves up and down, as you pressurise, you don't want water going backwards, so the ball bearing will actually create a seal as it pushes against this one. So the last thing I need to do on this body is I need to put a pin just through there to stop the ball bearing as it goes up sealing this entry point. Stainless steel wire to fit in here, and that fits in there just to stop the ball bearing going hard against that other face. Here's the main components now for the axle pump, and you can see also I've made the eccentric and the eccentric strap for it. If you look at episode 12, there's a section there where I create the straps and the eccentrics for the slide valves, and the process I used on there is exactly the same as the process I used for this one, so I'm not really going to repeat it again. Episode 12 if you're interested to see how this was made. So this is the main axle pump completed. I've done one or two little refinements from the last time you saw it. I've done away with those fibre washers. There were some fibre washers in here and they appeared to be very thick and very clunky. There were no need for them to be that thick. So I've made some washers out of PTFE. That's the same material I've used for the gaskets on the cylinder, and that worked pretty well on there, so I thought I'd use the same on here. And the other thing I've done is reduce this length down slightly as well, so these aren't quite as long, and that's had the overall effect of reducing the height of this main body of the pump. Okay, we'll just finish off this episode and give you a little demonstration. I've got a little bit of coloured dye so you can see the effect better. But if I now start this pump, you can see hopefully clearly there, squirting the dye coloured water, and that's enough to keep the boiler topped up. So there we are, there's our pump completed, ready for the next stage. We've got the pump and the eccentric. The only remaining thing to do is we need a connecting rod, some connection rod to join the two together. I really need to determine what the length of that's going to be, exactly where this is going to fit on the frame.